We have, our crack team back in the back room. Is that crack or cracked? Well, we have our crack team who has already taken today's news, and they pulled out for our edification several of the highlights from today's news, which I have here on these pages. Plus there was some news came in on the regular machine, but we'll get to in a second. I think some of this may be pertinent there too, and if not, we'll throw it to the floor, wrestle it, step on it, and twist it. And who will know the difference later? A man with a scab always has a friend as long as he will scratch it. The dents will laugh at anything. Well, except one thing. When life's a mess, men dream of death as orderly. Philistines never apologize to artists. Everybody has a sense of humor but man. The hell is that? Oh, it's the hockey scores. I thought I'd finally met a match that I could not see anything symbolic, even metaphorical. Human life is singularly sacred insofar as electricity is. Those who don't know how simple it is are often found out amongst their fellow man, happily proclaiming the good news that it's not as simple as you think. Civilization. Sissies telling glands, bad boys, bad. The weak have an unfair advantage. They can hide anywhere. The difference between civilized areas and not civilized areas is this. Shit happens in both places, but nobody bothers to mention it except in the first one. Civilization. Sissies. Oh. I was going to try to pick it up right quick. At least some of you get upset when civilization sounds as though it has been subject to some hectoring. It's real hard to get men to hear anything new without them taking it real seriously. This is one way that life keeps men from hearing anything new. Only a real thinker knows how his mind works, and what the hell does he care? The reason that brains seem more important than rectums, and why neurologists charge more than proctologists, is so that things will seem this way. You didn't lose that, did you? The reason that brains seem, you got to remember seem, more important than blah, 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 and neurologists, blah, 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 it's all that way so that things will seem that way. I don't think that was listed again under Caruselian logic, was it? Anyone born in Budapest who either wants to stay there or who wants to leave is forever a Hungarian. A man who is frightened by his own mind doesn't have much to be afraid of. Amongst the items, you notice there was one or more that I read. I know that there was some more actually on the full wire service items for the last 24 hours. I looked back there, but there were several tonight about artists. Some days there are news about artists, some days there's not. You know, like on some days there's just a plethora of info and interesting information about the horseshoe tournaments. You know, and other times it's not. After that it'll be like, badminton or, biblical archaeology. You can't ever tell. That's the great thing about the news. Pardon me. I couldn't resist. I was going to say, today on the civilian news service, there was an idiom that, strangely enough, almost tracks this kind of good news, the made-up news. I'm sure some of you heard it. It's nothing new, but here it is again, and it was all over the news. In a civilized Western country, at a recent art exhibit, one of the winners selected a nice, abstract piece of watercolor, selected, sold by the time it got put up, turned out was sent in, as a joke by a family of a 4-year-old girl who painted it at the kitchen table. Abstract. Everybody, I'm sure you know what abstract means. Quite old. I'm sure you've heard stories. Every 3 or 4 years, it'll make the news. Network news. I mean, people are dying of hunger and being hit by stray horseshoes during important tournaments. And network news will take time out. Newspapers will take up column space that they could have sold advertising or put in something useful, like astrology or something. That every few years they'll throw in that somebody gets a monkey, a chimpanzee, to fool around with paint, and they send it in, and some critic will seriously critique the work. I mean, you're so used to it. That's why I'm going through all this, because I know all of you have heard this, and from the look on your face, some of you heard what I was bringing out in the last day or so about this 4-year-old girl. The news people, I want you to get the gist of this now, of what I'm going to point toward. Here it is. Serious guys making big bucks, sitting there. Let me go back to the network, because that's big money. Here are the guys making $1 million a year, sitting there at a desk. They're reporting. They've got reporters. They've got stringers. They're using satellites. It's a big money maker. And they spend big money to bring you the news. And there it was. They took out a couple of minutes at least. And a serious man, and he looks at you. And he seems fairly sophisticated, hip. Of course, you're supposed to assume that people that read the news are sort of makers of the news. That if they read hip news, then that means they're hip, and especially if they just kind of cock an eyebrow. But they read the news, they say, here's a new interesting news item concerning the arts, and they almost snicker. And if you're sitting there and you got the right kind of brains in your past, or you wouldn't be here now, you've got some ordinary Philistine, bourgeoisie, ordinary, middle-of-the-road, middle-class brains. And you can understand. You could almost hear it coming. So here's an interesting news item before we take a break, having to do with the world of modern art. And you see their lip, and you know what's coming. Or you should. At a recent art competition in such and such place, here is one of the selected winners, and they showed it. But it turns out that this was not done by a local artist, not even by someone in art school, and the guy's lip keeps. It says it in fact was not even submitted on a serious basis, and you can just hear it. All you got to do is hear your own ordinary, middle class, stable, predictable hormones, and they're going, yeah, oh, yeah. It wasn't even saying seriously. A man and his wife in Leeds sent it in as a joke. It was painted by their 4-year-old daughter. And you can see inside the man. And you can see, if you get this good, not only watching him, the guy reading this news, you can see inside the nervous system of man collectively in large parts of the planet. At least let's say in the United States, because I'm saying that this was on the U.S. network. You can see not just him, but you can see the nervous system, a large part of the collective intelligence of man going. And that is just by any definition, by sophisticated people with college educations, people who in many other aspects, or at least in one aspect, some area in which they are an expert, field of science, or even other of the social sciences, could be in literature. If it's anybody who's not an artist, and they do not by any means have to be crude, because if they were too crude, if it was just somebody that was a bricklayer out in Omaha, they wouldn't even see the humor in it. If they're staying in a bar and this comes on, they think, you know, I wish, turn on another channel, see if the scores are on. They don't even see the humor in it. So you got to be even more educated and sophisticated to appreciate the humor. Now the question is, what the hell's funny about it? Because what they're talking about, the arts, and especially, let's take something, a non-representational piece of art, painting, for the moment since it was painting. And man's nervous system at the highest end, at the ordinary level, just ordinary, educated, sophisticated people, etc., look at it, and if anybody makes the slightest joke, if somebody says, what do you think of that? They go, Jesus, what kind of scam is painters still pulling on us? What is it they're looking for, and why is it not acceptable? Why is it funny? Why is it really funny to find out, hey, they got fooled again? The question, who got fooled? What is being fooled? Then the insinuation being, this is a fake. A fake of what? Now, may we, with surgical precision and without the use of anesthetics, draw your attention away from painting and consider it thinking, that's all that is. Anything that man does that is singular to man on this planet is an output of the nervous system here. That all ideas of looking for inspiration, of talent, that's some kind of God-given something or other. They can call it anything they want to, but if a man cannot think, if we're not talking about a man, he doesn't do this. Even if they can get a chimpanzee to do it, a man's got to put a chimpanzee up to it. Because a chimpanzee sitting around for the rest of his life, one bored completely out of his gourd, will never think, what I do, I'm going to find me some watercolors, I'm going to paint a damn picture. I don't care whether it comes out looking out like Wyatt or, Dolly or Kandinsky. They will never think about it. So you can't say the chimpanzee would paint. Somebody got to put him up to it. So it's only... Or they've had elephants do it. The point is they got to put a brush with paint in an elephant's trunk, and when somebody pushes his trunk, or he's already been taught that if he'll wave his trunk, that they'll give him a jar of peanut butter. So he does. Back to the point. Anything that's called the arts, whether it was painting, sculpture, literature, anything that man does that nobody else does, it's because of this. We've been through this enough. And if you doubt that, all you got to do is disable this, and there is no art. There's no literature. There's no nothing that's man. All you got to do is a screwdriver. So, why is it that the heart of the ordinary collective thought of man is just waiting? And now remember, don't try and take some kind of position like that we're all artists or we're on the side of artists against those dumbass middle class limited vision Philistines. The Philistines are in charge. You got to remember that. Rightfully so. But what is it in man's nervous system, and it has to do with the way things progress at a stable, predictable, understandable to all, that's all hyphenated, understandable to all manner. Why is it, and this is just a great example, is non-representational art, but you can find it in literature, but you got to push it a bit further. Burroughs and some of the people back in the 50s that started taking, they'd write poetry or a play and cut the pages in two and close their eyes and paste them together. Pass it out and you're supposed to read it and you start reading a line that skips and it makes no sense. It's sort of like this. It's even worse. It's so bad that they don't even criticize that. Well, if you understand that, that is so far. In other words, to write gibberish won't make the news. I mean, if they had a gibberish contest in Leeds instead of an art contest, and they put a 4-year-old kid in, or put a chimpanzee on a typewriter and he wins, they're not only not going to cover the chimpanzee won, they're not going to cover it to start with because it's too far gone. This, on the surface, in some way has ebbed its way or edged its way into the collective cultural consciousness of humanity, just enough that ordinary people will accept the fact that this is supposed to be art, this is supposed to be painting, comma. They're not going to say, I'm not going to buy it, I wouldn't go look at it, but they'll accept that. Enough if they flash it on the screen and the news anchor says, a new interesting news item regarding modern art. And people go, oh, this is going to be good, I know it. They accept the premise. But what is it they find so funny? The reason I threw in, you understand, if it was gibberish, that is so far removed, that is literature gibberish, which is sort of literarily the version of this to many people. What this is to painting would just be gibberish written out. But it is so far removed that they won't even buy the premise. They wouldn't even find it. You can't make that which is unfunny to start with. You can't make that which the ordinary mind won't even accept as a premise. You can't come up with a punchline. If you start telling the joke, the setup, and the ordinary mind won't accept it, there's no such thing as a punchline. But this, just for reasons that have nothing to do with art, it's beyond all that. But for reasons, this has become at least an acceptable premise to laugh at. The question, if I may stress it one more time, because it has nothing, it's way beyond art. That's not it. But what is it that so infuriates? They don't just laugh at it because, as you know by now, ordinary humor is just a form of, sometimes we're decent and charitable and say it's a form of hostility and aggression. It's also a form of fuming. What is it that so infuriates people about this? They will laugh, but it's a form of being infuriated. And the laughter is, ha ha, those dumb sons of bitches, whoever those smart-ass arty people are, boy, did it catch them. Ha ha! Some kid brought this in, or a chimpanzee painted it, and they gave it a prize. And you can just see them. What's going on? Why are they so happy that that which they don't understand to start with, in some way, has been shown to be without basis anyway? If it's without basis anyway, if it's ridiculous, which is what I was trying to get you to see, if it was gibberish written, men wouldn't even find anything funny about it because they won't accept the premise. It won't even start to fly. It won't get it on the stage. But once it is, why do, such as painting, what is it that so infuriates people that they've accepted the fact that this is supposed to be painting, but it doesn't make it? It's a fake. And I'm delighted. What if the first part is true? What if there was some objective form of painting? Of course, with the Philistines, the ordinary people, it's still a painting is supposed to be representative of something. And when it's really working at the best, middle class, it's a painting of somebody. And when it's really working good, it's somebody that you recognize. Oh, that's the Queen of England. No, now there's painting. But that's Mickey Mouse. That's Mickey Mouse dressed up in a tuxedo. Yeah, no, that's what I call painting, Martha. Look at that. But what is it that infuriates them and they say that this is a fake? And they're delighted that somebody got caught with their pants down. But it's a fake of what? And they can't even, of course they're not supposed to, but can't even carry it any further. Like, well, why am I delighted if I know it's a fake to start with? If I'm correct, let's assume that their middle class, the ordinary view is correct. That this is this is a farce, it's garbage, it's some kind of perverted joke. All right, if that's true, then what the hell do you care if they got caught? Why are you still mad about it? May I suggest to you that the madness, the hostility, is not that far removed from why people do not like cemeteries. You want me to play the part of an ordinary Philistine? I can do it. I've been practicing. Oh, wait a minute, that doesn't make any sense. people are afraid of the dead. It spooks them. But what's that got to do with what you're saying? Because people are afraid of the future. Yeah, but cemeteries are the past. May I speak? I'll be the commentator now. Well, wait a minute. Between you two, you can't have it both ways. You can't say that people dislike modern art, that they're happy when it gets when it's found out to be a fraud in some particular instance. Then you seem to be insinuating that they're laughing because they fear the future, and that in some way represents the future, at least the unknown. You can't have it that way and say that's the same reason people fear the cemetery, because that other guy just wanted you. The cemetery represents the past. So that's the way you treat commentators. Anybody get in a debate and stand in the middle and say that they're impartial, they deserve it. Back to, all right. That was a long way around, but there's less and less room, so I also heard on the news, to establish cemeteries in modern urban areas. Back to, what is it that you can sit there and feel the kind of glee? You can feel it, if not for yourself, collectively. And it seems justified. The glee at finding out that this piece of art, that a bunch of people, and somewhere they got, it's probably civic money, tax money, some foundation. They're not complete idiots. It's obviously people, trust me, baths, haircuts, suits and ties, even though they may be in the art world, probably some people that were fairly, really middle class on the committee somewhere. They sat there and they picked out, all right, we like this. Give this a blue ribbon, put this in the top 5, and found out a 4-year-old girl, found out an elephant, a chimpanzee. What is it that you can feel for humanity? You can feel for the collective nervous system that goes, it just has chills. I mean, the glee, what's an extreme synonym for glee? It's just, ooh, I love it. What? Because the glee is, did you think that somebody, in ordinary intelligence, of course, would say, well, that's so smart-ass, people that think they're so big, or they think they're so smart, all these arty people that don't have to actually work 8 hours a day, and probably have sexual relations with people that's not their own husband or wife, and live that kind of bohemian life. Oh, boy, it's a good thing. I'm glad they got it. What does that represent when you can cut through all of that? What is it at the nervous system level that people are so happy that from their view that something that is a fraud got found out by a bigger fraud? But they knew it was a fraud to start with. But now they're delighted that it got found out again. What's going to be the output? Why are you delighted? Speaking, you representing the view of collective intelligence. For them to find the delight in that, take it a step further. If it did have any physical, out in the street basis, then what does that represent that they got found out? I mean, where's it going after this? That's the end that you know you're not going to hear more on the news. There is no really anywhere else. But if you took that seriously, like, well, it's a good thing, maybe humanity will finally come to their senses and we'll quit being bamboozled by stuff like this and spending tax dollars on this kind of thing. That they caught them again, a 4-year-old girl. Boy, I bet they are chagrined from top to bottom. Well, they're not to start with. But on top of that, if it's ordinary intelligence, what do you think is going to happen? If it is justifiable and there's some reality, I'm talking about serious reality because tax money involved, reputations. What's going to happen now that this is found out? What should happen? What would you expect would happen if it was just in some slight different area? All right, I'll just have to go ahead and answer for you. You would assume, naturally, reasonably, that all right, they're going to the people who gave this girl that award. They're going to strip all the medals off of them, take away their keys to the museum, find out what kind of tax money or grant they've had for the last 6 months, demand they pay it back, probably pull off their gloves and slap them in the face. What else do you want? Put them in stocks? Tar and feather them? run them out of town, pass the word all through Interpol, whatever the artistic version of Interpol, send out their picture of all these people, some poor little old librarian, some 60-year-old white-haired woman, plus a few guys in berets and cigarettes, but a cross-section, and send out these photographs. Watch for these people in your country. Do not, repeat, do not let them judge any artistic content. What are they going to do? Back to the question, if you're following, what should they do? Don't you realize if it was something else, if it was like a fraud that had been pulled in the manufacturing end, instead of this, what if it was a contest to come up with a new drug to treat cancer, to treat headaches? And it was found out that one of them looked promising on paper. Or who can come up with a new equation? What if it's a mathematical society? And this equation comes in that is so striking. Anyway, they look at it and they think, that is interesting. We hadn't seen this concept. You know, let's list this, put this up with the top 10 equations. And they find out that it was somebody's dog, that they fixed up this big old typewriter that would, do numbers and symbols, and the dog just did, and they sent it in. You would expect, hey, that man, that scientist, that mathematician, that is the end of his career, and you'd be correct. And you might go, ha ha, especially if you had a hard time with algebra back in college. You go, oh, boy, those smart asses. And of course, if it had something to do with health, like I was trying to say, I know it's possible, you just don't hear, they don't do this, but it could be a contest like suggestions for new treatments for cancer or something, and they say, well, this is pretty good, and it turns out that somebody's 2-year-old or 12-year-old nephew suffering from Gruber's syndrome, that they open a dictionary and he goes, points to different words, and it just so happened they put them together, and it seemed to make some sense. And you find out, hey, boy, were they tricked. The people's reputation, their position in their field, their position in life, it's finished. Flesh it and forget it. They're done for. But nothing happens in the art world. Do you follow? One more time, forget that it's actually art. We're just talking about at the end of the nervous system to such a degree that it seems nebulous, almost beyond comparison to begin with. Like, how are you going to compare this to an equation? How are you going to compare this to a chemical analysis of a drug? It even gets, how are you going to compare it to a novel, a poem, that assume it's not gibberish, even if you don't like it? How can you compare that? How can you compare that to music? Again, assuming it's not completely dissonant to ordinary ears, how can you compare that with just almost any kind of music you look at and nobody knows what the hell it means? So then why is the nervous system delighted that besides this, then we pull out the 4-year-old girl one, that doesn't look that much different, and then go, ha! Well, now, all right, now whoever that was, I don't like it, let's say. But, that was a painter, we'll assume, a real painter. But look at the one next to it. It turns out it was a 4-year-old girl painted that. And if you look, and if you're an ordinary, you think, well, what the hell's the difference? Even the people laughing. If you ask them, well, what's the difference? They'd go, well, of course, I can care for it. They could do things, well, if you're that good, I'll go a little bit. They could say, well, there is none. And then if I tried to go, well, then they'd go, well, and they still wouldn't get it. Because that is the point, and that's also not the point. Back now, if we may try and press on. A news item. It is real, I know the English is not exactly real hard. You can say really hard if you want to fool around. But it is real hard, according to this news item, to get men to hear anything new without them taking it really serious. What if? I got it. Oh, I got it. I meant to point at my head and I missed. I got it. Why don't we play like this? Is all symbolic, metaphorical. And that represents that is to painting, to get away from that, what something new intellectually would be to the mind. That is, painting-wise, to the eye, what something new would be to the intellect. This news item says it's really hard to get men to hear anything really new without them taking it really seriously. They take out several minutes out of the network news, big money, to laugh about this. Why? Because they take it really seriously. If it was just a silly joke, they wouldn't cover it, because a silly joke would be the example that maybe you missed before, that a poetry gibberish contest, one of the gibberish winners turned out to be a 4-year-old girl. That's not serious enough to be silly, or vice versa. It would not be covered. So although they start, and they say, here's an item, another item from the world of modern art, they're already laughing. You're already laughing. You're waiting. You know why? Because they take that seriously. We are far afield from any serious network news watcher or anchor to follow any of this. They're taking that very seriously. And of course, an ordinary man can say, well, you just admitted that as soon as they started reading it. I mean, as soon as the guy looked down and went, you knew something was coming, he just went, here's another news item from the world of modern art. And you can say, you just admitted. He started off smirking, laughing. How silly, how dumb is their attitude toward this? They take it very seriously. Why would you stop and laugh at something that ridiculous? That a 4-year-old girl in a little art contest in Bath or Leeds she got exhibited. Why? If it's nothing but silly, if it's nothing but of no consequence and foolish, why do they take enough time to even cover it and laugh at it? Of course, an ordinary mind can say, well, it's like these kind of little human interest stories and blah, blah, blah. Remember, the ordinary Philistines, the middle class, know it all. That is, they're never stuck for an answer. Anytime something new is presented to men, to try and tie it, you only have what would appear to be two choices. It's either going to appear to be gibberish of no consequence, all this is slash and burn, slash and dash. It appears to be gibberish of no consequence, not worthy of any attention, not even heard. If they did, for instance, on the network news instead of this, if tomorrow they covered, hey, here's another item, not in the world of painting, but still in the world of art. It's a poetry contest that was held outside of Frankfurt last week, and it was supposed to be this kind of modern blank verse. I'm doing a newsman. You know, the kind of stuff you people know that, you read and you think, did I get it backwards? What, is that an actual poem? Not like good stuff like, there was an old man from Tucker. And they say, so it was a modern, non-representational, how about that? A modern, non-representational poetry contest, which I don't know if there's ever been, but in other words, this kind, and they say, and one of the ones, I don't know how they could tell, but one of the ones that won, it was just non-representation. I got it here, folks, but I'm not even going to try to read it to you. It turns out, it wasn't a poet, was it? It wasn't even a serious entry. It was somebody's dog with a typewriter. Not get covered, because, and if it did, what I was going to say, one of the possibilities, if they actually did that on the news, you wouldn't hear it. They're not going to do it, but I'm trying to get you to see, because you do it to your own mind. If it is something new, there's only two choices. If it's too new, it gets to be no choice. They laugh out of fear, not at painting, not out of gibberish, but at the new. And if you don't think so, then you're back to the question about, well, why do they take it seriously enough, once you understand it, to laugh at it? How about another aspect? Why is it that all tyrants, who are extremely, trust me, serious men, Serious. What is the last thing on their little short list of things that they might allow in the kingdom? I mean, even if the list is only, if it's short enough, it's only got 2 things, one of them's going to be humor. You do not make jokes in public, and they don't even know why. Yeah, they sort of know why. But anyway, they don't know why. If you say, well, wait a minute, Papa Joe, esteemed good old tyrant you, why is it that you will not allow humor? Can you tell me a reason? It is too serious. They're taking it seriously. That's why they will not allow it. It represents not humor, but what humor is like a noise of a wheel that is rolling, and when it starts laughing, there's always the distinct possibility that it may get 1 inch past your toe. 1 inch past right now. I may not understand it, and I may have to hear it. And I don't like the sound of that laughter going on now. What are they talking about out there? They'd love to find out that which caused laughter somewhere turned out to be a fake joke. Well, I feel better now. I thought maybe it was actually something new and worthwhile, but it turns out it was a joke. I mean in the full sense, like it was gibberish. It was meaningless. Ha! What's that got to do with today? What's that got to do with putting food in our pockets and keeping me in power? Nothing. It's a joke. There was another part to the news item, if you recall. It is real hard to get men to hear anything new without them taking it real serious. This is one way that life keeps men from hearing anything new. If you can keep men laughing at that, the combination again. You can laugh at it, which is a form of rejection, or not even hear it. You're all right. But there is a kind of virus that has to do with the intellect that it multiplies and spreads through criticism. If the news, again that's not going on, but if the news, regular, ordinary news, the same kind of people, if they covered this story, but in this way, they didn't just laugh, they say, here's an item I'm having to do. Well, I'll go through it real fast. This couldn't happen, but this would be life stumbling for a second. This would be civilization and the collective intelligence of man slowing down. If a newsman said, he said, here's an item, and I almost smiled. I'm doing him now. Here's an item, folks. In fact, I almost smiled when I started to read this because it's from the world of modern art, which is kind of funny anyway. But this is not, I can't really say this is funny. It has to do with the fact that something new was going on, some painting. There was a competition going on. And the people in charge of trying to judge it got fooled in such a way that someone who had no business being in the contest, in this case a 4-year-old girl, somebody slipped it in through whatever nefarious, evil purposes they had in mind. And the people, having no preparation for this, sort of fell for it. Do we have some new extreme synonym for convoluted? Nah, don't give up. That could not happen because you realize they would then be taking this, and we're talking about serious now. Then they could criticize it, and it would spread. All right, try another way. Who is the necessary dancing partner with all artists of all stripes? Critics. Who is the dancing partner with everything that's true? Everything that's false. How does anything move in the intellectual world of man? By somebody saying, get that thing out of here. What the hell is that doing in our parade? Who thought that? Are you telling me that some decent human, some civilized, educated person actually said that? Wait a minute, we're going to have to stop. We're going to have to deal with this. It is patently on its face, it's insane, but this is the kind of crap up with which, this is the kind of insanity up with which we cannot put. Sound like a civilized thinker with a certain kind of inclination not to have prepositions end up in certain areas in which they have been previously found wanting. This is the kind of insane, incorrect ideas up with which we cannot put. If you stop and criticize something, as if man had a choice, but if that begins to happen on some collective basis, what you have from their view is like a virus, an infection, something they're trying to get rid of, they think. But the way in which that kind of virus, the way in which anything intellectually, culturally, artistically, again, everything that is singular to man, the way it spreads is through criticism. That's the only way it multiplies. It doesn't multiply through screwing. That's physical. Even if it is the bacteria themselves, they have to physically do it. In the non-physical world, things multiply through criticism. Through trying to push the boat away is the only way that the boat explodes and expands. It goes from being a rowboat into a John boat, into a ketch, at least into a day sailor, but the only way you can do it is for somebody to stand up on the deck and say, get that thing out of here. There's a balance kept by laughing at that which seems to be too new, no matter what they call it, too obscene, too irrelevant, too impertinent, too ridiculous. But if it's too ridiculous, nobody's going to stop and criticize it. If it is absolutely meaningless, the 4-year-old girl being hung after the competition would not make the news. So it wasn't that ridiculous. No, not hardly. And they could still say, those who wrote the news, those who read it, those who laughed, they could still insist, no, that is ridiculous. All right, it's ridiculous, sir or madam. But notice this, it is not so ridiculous that you didn't notice it. Well, yeah, but I don't know what that means. Well, that's because they're Philistines, but you understand, there is no way out. There is no way to prove it, because they can say, well, certainly I noticed it because it's ridiculous. They don't see that, nah, it's not ridiculous, it's why you noticed it. That's why you're laughing. Because if it was truly ridiculous, it would be impertinent. It would be sans any validity. There would be no pertinence to it. It is very wide-reaching. At least you made me stay on the artistic example in this painting too much. It is spread throughout everything that is singular and uniquely man, from religion to philosophy to culture to fashion to morality, through sexual mores, through social mores, through dancing, through everything that is singularly man, is thrown in this laughter, this derisive laughter that is in fact a kind of fear that continually goes on, and it seems without any analysis to be absolutely justified. I don't mean from a moral basis, it just seems justified to look at something that does not seem to have a clear and direct immediate message, which this, for those of you who hadn't thought about it, is not that far removed from a point-blank wall. To take that and then to find it to be, without any analysis, without any hesitation, that your whole nervous system just kind of quivers to hear. They gave an award for that one, and it turns out a 4-year-old girl painted it, or a chimpanzee. There's no room for analysis, for debate. What would it be to be able to think, to consider in such a way? You got to go several stages for it to make any sense. In such a way that what you thought, compared to what everybody else thought, compared to what you thought at the ordinary level, was this compared to a Rembrandt, to a representational painting. Then you could get to the point that you could think, and it didn't matter which one it was. that which seems to be, back to the example, representational painting is what I meant by Rembrandt. A painting you look at, or Norman Rockwell, or just a damn lithograph of dogs playing pool on a calendar. And you look at it and you think, well, now that's art. I don't know whether that's great art, but it's art because at least I look at it and I know what the hell it is. It's a family sitting there and they're praying at Thanksgiving with an American flag behind them and some dogs in the background in the other room. What are they doing? Playing? Well, whatever. The ordinary mind says that, whether it's good art, great art, I don't know, but that's art because I look at it and I know what the hell it is. All right? That nobody knows what the hell it is. Well, I've just painted myself completely in a corner. I don't know what to do after that. Don't your bourgeois brains wish? I know it's getting abstract, but look at the example we started. Consider we're not talking about art, we're not talking about painting, but you look at the art from any ordinary view and go, that is meaningless. Or it does not represent anything I can imagine. I don't mean to sit there and try to look at it, and think, well, maybe it is maybe there is a woman hidden in that. Maybe it is somebody's. Forget all. You just look and you say it's meaningless. It represents nothing. If that be so, how can you be mad about it? And how can you gleefully find out, wait a minute, somebody else did one that meant nothing, except they didn't mean to do it. It was a kid. Ha ha! It's like the mind going, well, they're not going to drag me out of here yet. They're not going to make me leave shore yet. As long as I can still laugh and recognize that I don't understand that, but hey, other people can be fooled. They're supposed to be in charge of understanding that, and they can't understand it either. Whew. Plus, hell, if I can just hold on, I'll be dead in another 30 years. I don't have to worry about it. Why does that in the art, in painting, why does that which represents nothing? And let's say that the painter is so far beyond even a subliminal or attempt to hide in some kind of abstract way a message or a human faith. The man just, it's just obvious he just threw 2 or 3 blobs on the paint and he says it represents nothing known. It is not representational, is what painters call it. That means it does not represent anything, which they've tried it in music. Many of you surely know they have tried for a long time for certain composers to say, do not take what I have written as being program music. And many of them will not put names on it. Many of the composers, call it Symphony No. 5, call it Concerto 27. But I heard some critic, or my wife said, well, when you first started playing that, to me it sounded like a summer day. Why don't you call it Summer Day Symphony? And they go, no, don't call it anything. I want my music to speak for itself. I don't put a name on it, or then it starts playing and everybody goes, oh, doesn't that, close your eyes, Hubert, and it sounds like, doesn't that sound like a summer day and some phones? They try it, but we're getting off, we're not off subject, but fill it in yourself. It has had no big effect because you're dealing with a different sense and you're hearing music and trying to picture something, and so men continue to weasel out of that one, whether the composers take it seriously, that is, the attempt not to label it or not. But anyway, they have been attempting to do that which seems to be non-representational. That is, they don't intend it musically to sound like anything for you to go, sound like a summer day. No, it sounds like a winter day. No, it sounds chilly. A painter could say, that is non-representational. I did not intend it. It's not a trick. It's not a contest. It's not for you to look at and go, oh, I see what it is. It's supposed to be, it's a forest being burned, and it's something to do with how we're destroying the ecology. And the guy, it doesn't mean anything. It's just what it is. Enjoy it. Look at it. No. Say the middle class. One more time, away from painting completely. If it is non-representational, then you put it into the intellect. What is, if it was actually any kind of new information available? The good old example, if the gods flew down, or if flying saucers came in from another reality, and they said, all right, we got what you guys been crying for all these years, and all these myths and all these religious tales, you want new information. Yeah, give it to us. If they gave it to you, and it was new information, it would be something like this. And then what are you going to do? Everybody's going to go, holy mother. You know, boy, I hope this is a Hollywood joke. I hope these are not actually flying saucer people, or we're in bad shape. Either that, or they tell them, all right, here it is, and they tell you, and then they fly off, and everybody looks at each other. All the middle class, all the same people, and they say, what in the hell did they say? Somebody said, well, I don't know. I don't understand flying saucer talk. And they didn't understand anything, you know, after they made the announcement and said, all right, here it is, the secret you've been waiting for. You understand? It became gibberish. It's like you didn't hear the news. If it's too new, you look at it and go, what the hell does that mean? And it means nothing. What we've been calling several times a point blank wall. You understand? A blank wall. There's not that much difference between that and a point blank wall. That is what infuriates, rightfully so, frightens the ordinary mind. Is their view is, hey, don't try and pull that crap on me. I came here to look at a painting. I came here to hear something new. I drove all the way from Peoria just to see this damn flying saucer, and they guaranteed me it was people from another planet with a message from the gods or more advanced civilizations, and this is it. I can't even understand it. There was another news item I don't think we brought in here that said that anybody who could think nonpartisanly, anyone who could think in some abstract, some non-representational way, does not reject what everybody else thinks. The representational schools of art, the classical and romantic schools of music, music that makes sense. They do not reject what the collective has thought, which is all of that. They do not reject it on the basis that anything that specifically that the collective has thought, they don't reject it on the basis that, all right, it was either right or wrong, or it was correct, or it was a little off. They reject it on the basis that the collective thought it in the first place. That's all you need to know. All an independent mind needs to know is, he finds out, well, here's what people think. Well, that's enough. You don't have to hear anymore. Well, here's who got hung today. Here's who they're performing today in Symphony Hall. You don't have to hear the music. You don't have to see the painting. And they say, well, here is who won this year's, or this month's, or this week, or today's Pulitzer Prize in fiction. You don't have to ask. You don't have to see the book. You don't have to ask the name. All you got to hear is the collective's already thought it. That's all you got to know. And you know it makes sense. And you know that it means nothing. That it represents something, and therefore means nothing. That it's sane, it's sequential. That all of the Philistines, all of the decent people went, here, here. They had a vote. Here is a new painting, and does this not resemble a real family sitting down at a real table with real people and real food on it? Yes, it does. Here, here. And listen to this music. The composer entitled this, Late at Night in Bucharest. Now just listen. Doesn't it sound like it? And you say, yes, it does. Here's some ideas. It says that these ideas are messages from the gods. Okay, and the messages say, us gods say to you people, think about us. Do right. Suffer a little, feel guilty, and try to do better. Does that not sound like real, representational, useful information? And everybody goes, yes. Only other Philistines, only people, remember, for as long as those born in Budapest either want to go or want to stay, they're always Hungarians. A real thinker doesn't worry about what the collective thinks on the basis of, wait a minute, do I want to stay or go? Do I agree with this or disagree? If you do that, you're forever stuck within the confines of Hungary. You will forever stay part of the collective. If you can think, when I say reject, you don't get mad, I just had to pick out a word, ignore, abandon, but reject in the non-prejudicial sense, you reject what the collective has thought, painted, composed, written, mused, philosophized, not on the basis in any way that It's right or wrong, it's decent, it's representational, it's good art, it's bad art, it's good music. If you can think you reject it, you ignore it on one basis. If somebody already thought it, that's good enough. You don't have to ask anymore, has this already been thought? Because if you heard it somewhere outside your own head, there's your answer. If you could think, there is no authority higher. There is no better judges. There's nowhere else to look outside your own brain. I'd give tonight's news, I don't know, they didn't ask me, but I'd give it, what, somewhere between an 8.9 and a 9.2. Well, I thought his entry at water level was a little late, so maybe a 9.1. Huh? Hey, I got your 9.1.